Well, thank you everyone for joining us for the latest in the MillerKnoll Insight series online. My name is Mark Catchlove and I lead the MillerKnoll Insight Group. The MillerKnoll Insight Group is responsible for sharing our research and our insights, and I'm part of the research and insights team. If you don't know MillerKnoll, MillerKnoll is a family of brands, and you can see them all listed in front of you. And we design and manufacture products for places where people get healed, where they learn, where they live. And today we're going to be talking about places where people work. And the talk today is called Design with Impact. As we go along, feel free to put questions in the chat box. And if any of my colleagues wanted to answer any of those questions, looking at you, Ryan, feel free to do that in the chat box as well. But as we go along, use the chat box, but I won't be picking them up until much later. So we know that change in where we work, how we work has become at the heart of many conversations. It's actually become the subject of many newspaper articles, magazine articles. It's also become the subject of conversations around the dinner table. When you're out with your friends for a night, people are now talking about the way they're now working. I have friends that never used to be that interested in the type of work that I did, but now they know that I'm involved with the world of work and workplace. They often talk to me about these changes in the workplace. And yes, there are plenty of headlines out there that will get us clicking and looking at those thoughts and seeing what are the challenges in the world of work. Maybe we can look at what might be happening and we might see what's happening as a huge challenge. But we like to think that there is possibly opportunities in this challenge. In my own view, I don't think we have had a better opportunity to shape and develop the world of work to be a great experience for everyone. We know that historically, great crises have led to great innovation and opportunities. Now, here's one. You may or may not have heard of the Panic of 1873. This was a deep recession in the US, not quite as deep as the recession of the 1920s, but during this time, people found opportunities. The opportunity to develop the light bulb and the opportunity to develop the telephone. Wouldn't it be great to think that out of the challenges that we now face, we find great opportunities to create great work experiences, better than we've ever had. And like I said, I don't think we'll have a better opportunity. We know flexibility has become an expectation of everyone. Everyone now thinks about that flexibility. Whether everyone is getting that is another matter, but it's certainly on the agenda. And we've done some research with an organization called the Future Forum. And the last piece of research we did was earlier on this year in February. And we're developing new research. But we found from that research that actually 81% of employees want location flexibility. This is 10,000 global employees. That actually what they're looking for is flexibility in where they work. That might be at home, that might be in the office, that might be somewhere in between, but it also might be in different places when they're in the office. And this is a big focus for organizations. And I'm sure those that are online now, designers, workplace providers, workplace managers, are really thinking about this challenge of flexibility of place. But here's an interesting point to observe. That those same people responded by saying that 93% of them want flexibility in their schedule. And that is really important. We focus so much on the where, but we sometimes forget the when. The when is the bit that matters. Now, why might that be? If we think during the pandemic, people's lives changed and they adapted to those changes during a time of working from home, whether that was a new family member joining them, a baby, it might have been caring for parents, it might have been one of their children moved from one school to another, a child moved to university, and they got used to managing that very flexible schedule. And then suddenly that might not be possible. Well, whilst we look so often at flexibility in place, let's not forget that lots of people are looking for flexibility in the when they work. And what's interesting then is, does that mean that the office is dead? Does that mean that we don't need the office as much as we used to? Well, here's an interesting stat. 85% of employees still want time in the office. They still want to come to that central place. What do they want to do while they're there? Well, one of the things they want to do is collaborate. Now, collaboration is a term that we all use, but for me, it's a catch-all. We often use it as a catch-all word. It might be just informal chat. It might just be a little chat at the coffee machine, the water cooler, just to connect. Or on the other extreme, it might be that teamwork, that deep collaborative teamwork workshops. But that is why people want to come back to the office. They see the opportunity that collaboration is better in person. Another reason is camaraderie, or another word from camaraderie is friendship. I love that whole idea that actually, if you look at research, that people that have friends at work are actually happier at work. They're more engaged, and people come to feel connected. Why is that? Well, we get energy from each other. There is this thing about being with people, and even if you don't talk to people, you do get energy from seeing people. People feel like they want to belong, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that later on. And face-to-face time. That is what people are going to be coming back for. Now, that can be for a variety of reasons. They just want to see each other. It might just be to learn, as I saw someone put in the chat, to learn from each other. But it might be want to be seen by the management, that fear of missing out, that they want to be connected and they want to be seen that they're still around. Some research shows that you struggle to get promoted the more remote you are from the center. So that's why people have also started to come into the workplace as well. Now, the other thing that's interesting is that people will also come in to focus. And you've seen reports that the workplace will be about collaboration and home will be about focus. But let's not make assumptions that everyone can focus from home. There are some people living in circumstances and situations where they cannot do that at home. Or the way that their mind works means that they need a delineation between work and home, and they struggle to focus at home. So some will go in to focus. And that is why 85% of employees want some time in the office. The data that we read is complex, but we know that there are things that are lost when we don't have time together. It shows that if there's less time together, these are some of the things that are challenging us. Group assembly, we still need to, and even more remote companies still have group assembly. They still have times when they connect and where they join together because they see value in that. And so, and also, if you're going to have people being remote, at some times you're going to need to connect them together. But that group and large group assembly is hard to do remotely. Then there is that valuable team time. This is within your team, that team where you learn what each other are doing, you play off each other, whether you're being instructed like a conductor of an orchestra, or whether you're like a jazz musician where you're playing off each other. We need team time, and that tends to work better in person. When I say it works better, it doesn't mean it's impossible to do it remotely, and that's really important as well. And then peer collaboration, just trying to connect with those. And this could be from one team to another, it could be within your team. And that collaboration works often better in place. However, sometimes what you see is the combination of virtual and in-person collaboration. And that is very much that collaboration isn't always in person. There's very much that distributed work where sometimes you're working together and sometimes you're working alone. And if any of you heard the talk from Neil Usher a while ago, he talked about alpha and beta. And this whole idea that sometimes when we collaborate, we then need to go and work on our own. And when we work on our own, sometimes we then need to go and collaborate. Then the other thing that we need is feedback. Now, I know that on this call, there'll be a lot of designers. A lot of great design comes about not by sitting alone. It comes about by working together, by discussing, by giving each other feedback, by challenging each other, sometimes disagreeing with each other, getting feedback. But there's also that personal feedback, that feedback of how am I doing? How am I getting on? How is that working? And that is harder virtually than it is in person. And then there is this subject of something called weak ties and strong ties. You may or may not have heard of this. This was first aired by a guy called Mark Granovetta, and he talks about strong ties and weak ties. And it's also been raised more recently by a social scientist that we work with called Dr. Andreas Hofbauer. And what he says is that our weak ties have become weaker and our strong ties have become stronger. The strong ties are those teams that you work with all the time. You probably have seen your teams more than you ever did before the pandemic because we're doing this virtual, connecting all the time. But what has been lacking is those weaker ties, those networks, which are still important. And Andreas Hofbauer says that a lot of knowledge and information flows through our weak ties because we assume our strong ties know, but we pass the knowledge often through our weak ties. And we need that level of connection. It isn't all about your own team. It is about connecting with other teams. It may just be the barista that you regularly connect with, that kind of routine. But weak ties have struggled during the pandemic as well. And then there is this whole issue of mentorship and career development. Onboarding is so much harder virtually than it is in person. Again, not impossible because we managed it during the pandemic. But mentorship is really important. And a lot of mentorship is not someone telling someone else what to do. It is learning by observing. And that is really important. You see lawyers that kind of hear their colleague in a conversation and they learn from that. And their career can get developed by being in the place and actually being mentored. And then the last thing is that culture. The culture, it's really hard to maintain the culture of organization virtually. Now, if you start a business that is virtual and it remains virtual, that's going to be your culture. But the culture of connection that is supported by connection is really important. So let's think about these are the things that are challenges that we have. And this was also confirmed recently by a new report, a piece of research done by Dr. Nigel Oserland of Workplace Unlimited, also supported by Workplace Trends. And Maggie, I know you're on the call at the moment. And this is called the Enticing Workplace. And in 2 weeks, you can hear the whole output of this. And I'll make sure that one of my colleagues puts a link so that you can register for this online. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of pieces of data from that confirm the reasons why the office is sometimes better for things than the home. We asked the question, for each of the following work activities, do you personally find it is better supported in the office or at home? And what we found is all those things we've talked about, that the office is better for socializing, for knowledge sharing, for managing and mentoring, for teamwork, and for client meetings. And the reality is it's probably a combination of both as well. And obviously the confidential and concentration and productivity, people tend to say at home. But also don't forget, if you look, there are still some people that find concentration and confidentiality better in their office than it is at home. Another question we ask is, for each of the following factors, do you personally find it better in the office or home? And again, this was the output. At home, better to connect, better for in the office, better to connect, better for culture, better for leadership, better for that career development, the fear of missing out, better for belonging. So if you want to see the rest of the output of that, do check out that link, and I'm sure one of my colleagues will share that a little bit later so that you can hear that from Nigel. Now, what we also run is our own global workplace assessment. It's across a few countries, and you'll see which countries those are in a minute. It's a few thousand people. And I wanted to share some of the data from that with you as well. It's interesting that the location globally, when we looked at the data, nearly 50% work for companies with fully in-office policies. Now, that doesn't mean that offices are occupied 100% of the time, because they weren't even occupied 100% of the time before the pandemic. But the general policy is if you're working, you'll come into the office, but there'll be lots of reasons why people don't come in. But there isn't a whole encouragement to work from home. There might be working from clients or other areas. But what we see here is that 37% have hybrid policies in place. And on average, those with hybrid policies, their 2.4 days a week are spent in the office. And we see a breakdown, and here you can see the countries that we've talked about. Fully remote is actually a small percentage of those location policies. I'll make that bigger for you there. What you can see is that actually the least remote is India and Australia even, and Japan, and most remote is in the US and Canada, and a bit in the UK. But we can see that the full in office is bigger in India and Japan. So we'll share some of this data with you a little later. Now, what's interesting, and I've said this so many times as well, that actually a great workplace has to earn the commute. We talk about workplaces earning the commute. It's got to be worth people going to the office. But here's an interesting bit of data from those findings. What we found is that people that commute 15 minutes away, 15 to 30 minutes away, even over an hour, it's not a much difference to the amount, doesn't make a lot of difference to the amount of time till they come to the office. Now, that could be because of strict mandates, that actually people are coming in when they don't want to. But it's interesting that actually the commute time isn't making a huge difference. It is a bit of a difference, but it's not the days, it's not amounts of days that we thought it might be. And also we asked people a series of factors, and one of the factors that we asked them is, my workplace effectively supports working alone with distractions, without distractions. And what we found is quite a lot of people found that workplaces do enable them to work without distractions. Again, this is more than we imagined, because when you look at a lot of the data from places like Leesman, noise is a problem in offices, and I believe it still is, but companies seem to be looking at providing places or policies where people aren't distracted. Couple more bits of data. These are the top 3 factors globally that scored highest. Supporting scheduled team meetings, using digital technology, and my manager is effective at leading teams. They were the top scorers. What were the lowest scorers was a space within my workplace isn't effectively supporting me and my team. And if a space is within my workplace isn't effectively supporting me or my team, I feel empowered to change it or request that it has been changed. And that is interesting to see that people haven't got the ability to change, doesn't support group gatherings, not as environmentally sustainable. Now, there are still positive scores, but these are the lowest scores. And my workplace effectively supports unstructured collaboration. And there are some challenges there. So pretty good scores, but still that could be improved. And of all our analysis, this is how the countries scored. That those that agreed with all of our positive statements, India comes out the most satisfied in Brazil, and the least satisfied with their workplaces, Japan, Germany, and the UK. And we will share some of that data. And we know companies are facing lots of challenges. We talk to organizations talk to us. We attend conferences like you do, and we hear that organizations are facing a variety of challenges. And I've probably missed some of these off of here, but these are the challenges that we see in organizations. Things like, how do we manage flexibility? How do we introduce flexibility? How do we optimize our real estate? How do we make the most benefit from what is our second biggest cost? How do we develop talent? How do we design for inclusivity? These are all the challenges that our clients are talking about. And when you analyze those challenges, what you find is that they can be put into 3 buckets. And those 3 buckets can be under 3 headings. They are well-being, connection, and change. And we think that if you consider these, get strategies around designing for well-being and connection and change, you can design with impact. And that is really important. Whatever you design has impact. The thing that we're looking for is to make sure that that impact is positive. It is not time for a one-size-fits-all. The workplaces you're providing and designing need to respond to a multitude of needs. And so let's look at these subjects. Well-being strategies. Well-being can be described as a positive state of being comfortable, healthy, and happy. It's a broad range of factors that impacts our experiences. It impacts us physically, psychologically, and socially. We know that place affects the way that we feel, the way that we work, the way that we act, the way that we react. And here are some well-being strategies, just little subjects for you to think about where you can go and explore more. And there's some great research out there. The first thing we talk about is design with holistic ergonomics. As an organization, we have set the bar high when it comes to physical ergonomics. Our organizations have really done well in those physical ergonomics. But there is more than just physical. We talk about social ergonomics and cognitive ergonomics. Are we designing spaces that meet our social ergonomic needs, where we can connect, where we can be alone, where we can network, where we can be seen, where we can be valued? Social ergonomics. And then cognitive ergonomics. This is interesting. Spaces affect how we think, how our brain works, and how our brain reacts. And in fact, the last Insight Series webinar was from a psychologist called Dr. Sally Augustin, and she talked about how to design workspaces for creativity. Why? Because that's a part of that holistic ergonomics. Space, light, color, noise, it affects us. It has an ergonomic effect on us. Great well-being is about giving people a voice and then giving them choice. A voice is listening to your people. People need to feel valued and listened to feel well. And this is recognized in when you're developing communities, residential communities, but also in the world of work. Places that matter start with people. And we need to hear the voices of the people. And then we need to develop choices, because here's the problem. When you hear those voices, you will hear a variety of requirements. And what I may need today, I might not need next week. Good well-being is about voice and choice. It's also about great hospitality. And when you read the word hospitality, you might think food and drink. Yes, that's important, but I mean much more than that. It's this whole subject of feeling welcome, feeling like you belong, feeling like you're valued, that actually it's about the whole workplace experience. Are the workplaces you're designing or managing or providing, are they hospitable? Great workplaces also provide spaces for respite and restoration. We all need this. You might have just come off a very tough phone call with a client, with your boss, with a family member. You might have just had some bad news. It might be related with menopause. You know, people need respite and restoration. And that is often 10 or 15 minutes in an area where we're probably not going to be disturbed. Sometimes it needs to be private because you don't want everyone seeing that. And you may, you know, it might just be difficult, but we need spaces for respite and restoration. And then we need to consider the whole subject of biophilic design. I'm going to read this to you. Biophilic architecture is a design philosophy that seeks to create buildings and spaces that connect people with nature. It incorporates natural elements, materials, and light to enhance the well-being and productivity of occupants and the built environment sustainability. It really is important that we don't live in and work in sterile environments. It's about materials, it's about finishes, it's about colors. And yes, it is also about plants. So that is well-being. Let me move on to the subject of connection. It's really crucial to see how a place can facilitate connection with the organization, that when you walk in, you feel like you're connecting to the business, but of course to each other. And we've seen that people care about coming into the office for camaraderie, for connection. How are we doing it? Well, here are some connection strategies to think about that connection. We've got to think about large group assembly where people can connect, those where they're coming in together. We've got to think about neighborhoods. And this is important, that where people come in, they feel like they've got places where they belong. And that is important. That, and what an interesting stat, which I didn't mention in the Nigel Oserland research, was that actually when people come in, if they've got an assigned desk, they are more likely to want to come in. That's a driver for people wanting to come into the office. Why? Because they love that sense of ownership. And neighborhoods are another way of giving people a sense of connection and ownership. We've got a plan for impromptu connections. Yes, those water cooler moments, those things that build. Nigel Oserland also did some research for us around the psychology of collaboration. And a lot of collaboration is about trust. And a lot of that trust comes by just connecting, small, quick, impromptu connections. I thought this was an interesting one. We also get connections by seeing what other people are doing, what work is on display, what are other people working on. And this particularly, again, for designers that are on this call, you will know you like to see what other people are working on. And that isn't always seeing it, it's hearing those conversations, seeing what other people are working. And we also need that connection to leaders. I would like to think we're past the days of having an executive floor where leaders can't be connected. But that is important. We need to provide. And so this is why HR needs to play an important part of this. And then we've got to make those video experiences equitable. We've got to make sure the experience of connection virtually is as good as the experience physically when there is a hybrid meeting. And we've seen some of those disasters where you can't see who's in the room, you can't see who's speaking because there's such a tiny little space on the room as well. I wanted to read a couple of quotes for you. This is Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary. They say this: much of what human beings do is done in the service of belongingness or connection. And this is really interesting. If someone feels connected to an organization, they are naturally more productive. They work harder. Think about your private life. A lot of what you do is out of a sense of belongingness, whether that's to your family, to your friends, to your church, to your mosque, to your temple, to your tennis club, to your paddle club, all those kind of things. And actually work is very much about creating an environment of belonging, because that is what we do. So I don't do this for MillerKnoll, I do this work for my colleagues. And Paul Zak, who's done work with us, said this. He is a neuroscientist. Human beings are neurologically wired to seek positive social experiences. These encounters stimulate the brain, making people more cooperative and caring towards each other within the group. And that is really important, that we understand that we are neurologically wired to seek positive social experiences. Research shows that there's a high burnout amongst those that don't have those social experiences. You're more likely to feel burnout if you are lonely. We are wired to connect. Are we designing workplaces that connect? And this isn't anything new. This is a quote which says, face-to-face involvement is the premier communication tool, unmatched for subtlety and efficiency, but also a present wasteland of mysterious inhibitions and limitation. It requires vitalization. That was written by Robert Probst, the designer of Action Office, the first ever screen-based furniture system in 1968. This challenge is not new. We have to design for connection. And lastly, we have to look at how we are coping for change, whether that's the change of moving from one place to another, or the changing way that people want to work, or flexibility within the building. So let's think about a few of those change strategies. When we are managing change, it has to be participative. People need to be involved. I said this already. These places that matter start with people. We need to involve people. They need to be a part of the design. And that is quite a skillful process. Not every organization does this well, where it involves people. But you need to listen to people. You need to find out what it is that they do, how they do their work, what's their working styles, what are their preferences, what they need and what they want. And sometimes that's different, but good change starts with participative design. And then what you might need is a piloting, some trying out, because you can do everything you want with 3D drawings, but sometimes just try some piloting, work with your distributor or dealer to see if you can play with layouts and test and see what works, or whether that's piloting working processes. If you're going to do mandates, maybe you need to test them for a few weeks before you implement them as permanent. Piloting is important. Also, give people a variety of work settings to try, but give them choice there. And this, again, here, change is about enabling people to change from one place to another, giving people a variety of work settings. So maybe in your building design, you might need some modularity. And there was a time when we're looking at organic, but maybe with the amount of change, the unknown change that we're having, maybe we need a little bit more modularity and user adaptability, where people can change their own workplace in their own setting. As you can see here, this is a product of ours called OE1, where we can change it, the user can change it as well. And then, of course, there's a whole host of people who do the change management. Sometimes it has to be more than just the design team doing this, or the facilities team, or the HR team. Sometimes you need professional change management. It's a psychological process. Change management is both a skill and an art, and there is a science to it as well. So change is really important. And here's another quote for you. Human organizations have always been natural places of change, reflecting the organic nature of life. What is different now is the pace of change and the prospect it will come faster and faster. Again, 1968. We know that the world of work is changing, and whatever that strategy work you did last week is the results that's giving you, it's probably going to be different in 6 months' time. Any project you worked on a year ago probably needs revisiting already. And so a quote from 1968 is as valid today as it was then. I want to leave you with some thoughts, if I may, around this subject. Fundamental human needs. This is a subject dear to my heart. But what we are dealing with is humans. They are not human capital. They are not assets. They are not resources. We are dealing with fundamental human needs. And I want to share with you some research my colleagues did, where we looked at over 100 years of research into sociology, psychology, and anthropology, as well as military studies. And we saw that there are 6 fundamental needs, and work has to meet those needs. And you'll see these reflect those things of well-being, connection, and change. We all need to feel safe. So we all want a sense of security. First of all, that's physical security, and boy, is there, a need now for physical security. But actually, there's also what I call social or mental security, that we feel safe. We feel as secure in our job as we possibly can against what is a very difficult international backdrop, that we feel that we can speak up, that we feel listened to, that our voice is valued. Security is a fundamental need. Another one is status. Now, for some countries, status is still important, and we can't ignore that. But that's not what I mean here. Here, it's almost recognition for people's contributions. How are we recognizing people's contributions? Are we giving them a workplace that actually helps them contribute as well? Another fundamental need is a sense of purpose. And lots of research shows that this is one that can affect your health. A lower sense of purpose, and your immunity goes down, and in fact, lots more heart problems when you have a lower sense of purpose. But to have a sense, and once you've got that sense of purpose, we all want a sense of achievement. Now, here's the problem. How you achieve and how I achieve might be very different. And how I achieve today might be different for next week. That's why that well-being and change and connection is important. We all want a sense of doing a great job. We don't go to work to do a bad job. So we need the environment, and that is both physical, it's the way that we're managed, and the technology to help us achieve. And also, we all want a sense of autonomy. Now, for some, that's quite low, and for some, it's very high. Autonomy is freedom within boundaries, not anarchy, which is freedom with no boundaries. So make sure that when you're designing a space, there is a level of freedom. Now, as I said, for some people, this is really important. Some people's choice might be to do the same thing they've always done. That is still choice. The last fundamental need is this whole sense of belonging, this whole sense of connection. We all need a sense of belonging. It's what matters. It's why a lot of us exist. That's why when we don't feel like we belong, often it leads to other mental health challenges, low self-esteem, low connection. We all want a sense of belonging. Great workplace give you a sense of security, status, purpose, achievement, autonomy, and belonging. And belonging is also about inclusive design. For too long, we have designed for the median, and the people at the extreme have just had to manage. We have to look at whether we can design places that are inclusive and that where everyone feels welcomed and valued. There is a potential for designing for all. Here's an example, which is not a workplace, it's a kitchen tool. This is a vegetable peeler. This was designed by Sam Farber, who watched his wife struggle using tools, vegetable peeler in the kitchen, because she had arthritis. So he got to the work to design a tool that was easier to grip for her. But here's the interesting thing. It's easier to grip for everyone. And it's been a great example of an inclusive piece of design that looks good, that works well for everyone, and is now sold by, it's sold by Oxo Good Grips. It's amazing. Inclusive design, it approaches design and products, moves beyond the concept of accommodating just special needs, and seeks to include everyone. So let's ensure that offices are the preferred choice by including those things like well-being, connection, and change. And I'm going to open you up to questions, but before I close the slide deck, I want to leave this quote with you, that in the long run, businesses and business leaders will be judged not by their profits or their products, but by their impact on humanity. That is about design with impact. This is DJ Dupree, the founder of Herman Miller.